You guys might remember a couple months ago I built a few pieces out of plywood for my back patio. So when it came time to build a coffee table, I said to myself, Chris, you're not going to build another piece out of plywood. You're going to build a piece out of a whole pallet of it. Okay, so not really. The whole thing's actually made out of 2 sheets of plywood, and it's pretty simple to build, but let's hop into a quick animation to go over it before we start building anything. So the bulk of one of the sheets is going to make up the top and bottom of the table, and then the rest of that one's going to go towards the pallet base thing that the table sits on. Then with the other sheet, we're going to cut it into a bunch of strips that are 36 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. And those are going to create the wall so that this thing is 1, cheap to make, 2, capable of storing items, and 3, not a bajillion pounds. Alright, now let's have a kiss. So the first order of business was to break down my sheets of plywood into manageable chunks using my track saw. Done. Then I used my table saw to cut everything to their finished dimensions. So I started with the top and the bottom, which are going to get cut into 36-inch squares, and then I set those aside. Then I took another couple pieces that were slightly longer than 36 inches, and I cut out all of my strips. And the reason that I left them long here is because I'm going to cut them to their finished length with a pair of miter cuts that's going to go on either end. Once I was certain that I had enough pieces, plus a few to spare, I got out my crosscut sled and this little 45-degree jig that I made a couple months ago and had at it. In total, I think I had something like 56 pieces, so that was 112 miter cuts in total. But they go pretty quick once you're all set up. Next I could start putting everything together, and to do this I basically just worked my way up from the bottom by gluing and nailing down one layer at a time. And I just kept going until I got to the last layer before the top would have gone on. Next I grabbed this piano hinge and marked out where I'd need to mortise it in so that it would sit flush with the top of the plywood. After the perimeter was drawn in, I set the depth of my router to match the hinge and then started removing material. And I pretty much went until I was just shy of the line and then removed the last little bit of material using a chisel. Now to actually attach the top hinge, I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, so I had to kind of fumble my way through it. So if anybody has a better idea for the future, I'm all ears. But anyway, I started by attaching some double-sided tape to the very top of the hinge, and then I cut these little spacer blocks so that I could position the top where it would go, but without it actually touching the hinge. And then once I had it where I wanted it, I just removed them and did my best to stick it down. And I'm not sure how I missed capturing that part on video, but once it was stuck down, I had this box positioned at the same height as the lid so that I could open it up and rest it there while I secured it, which is what you see me doing in this shot. Next I could start in on the base, which is going to be made to look like a pallet. So this part's going to be made out of a bunch of strips that are cut to 33 inches long. All of the strips that lay flat are going to be about 4 inches wide, and the 3 that sit on their edge are 3 inches wide. So over at the table saw, I took my leftover plywood and cut a few panels to 33 inches wide, and then cut out all of the individual strips that I'd need. Next I marked out where I would cut out the notches that a forklift would use to lift the pallet, if it were real, and then used a combination of the table saw and my bandsaw to remove all of the material. Next, before I started assembling anything, I did the bulk of the coloring using some leather dye. And the reason that I'm doing it here is because after it's assembled, it's going to be really hard to access a lot of the areas. And actually, now that I think about it, you know what else is hard to access? Or at least should be hard to access? Well, easy for you but hard for others? Your passwords. and that's why I use Dashlane. So if you've never heard of them, to put it in plain English, I like to think of their services in 3 parts. First is automatically syncing your passwords, information for filling out forms, and information for making online payments across all of your devices, and making sure that they're accessible to you and only you, no matter where you are. And trust me, once you get accustomed to this, you'll wonder how you ever got along without it. At least I did. Now I'm used to filling out forms and making payments in a fraction of the time that it used to take me. And it seems like each year I add about 10 new passwords to my stable, and using the same simple one over and over is not really a good idea. So the luxury of having a way easier option for managing all of my accounts is huge. Next is a built-in VPN, or virtual private network, which makes doing things like browsing on public Wi-Fi, which can normally be unsafe to do, for lack of a better term, safe to do. And finally, their dark web monitoring service scans the web for any leaked personal data and sends you alerts so you can take immediate action to protect your accounts. Now, just to clarify, these aren't standalone services. When you get Dashlane, you have it all. So no matter where you go or which of your devices you're using, they've got your back. Alright, here's the best part. Right now you can try out Dashlane for 30 days for free using the link I put in the description box for the video. And when you're ready to subscribe, you can also save 10% off a premium subscription using the promo code 4eyes. So check it out and take them out for a spin. Alright, thanks Dashlane. Now let's get back to it. Once the pieces were dry enough to handle, I could start putting everything together. So here I have the assembly upside down and I'm attaching everything with screws. This really doesn't need to be super robust, and I didn't even bother with glue because it just would have been superfluous, honestly. Plus, I really didn't want to have to sand anything since I'd pre-finished. Anyhow, after it was all put together, I came back with more leather dye to get the edges. Then I could attach the pallet to the stack of wood, and I just kept it centered by placing it 1.5 inches from each edge. Next I put my finish on the stack portion of the table, and here I'm using a penetrating oil that I'm quite fond of. Basically you just wipe it on, let it soak in, and then wipe off the excess. And 2 coats did the trick. After that had dried, I wanted to put some final touches on the piece to sell the whole Stack of Plywood angle. So you know how you'll often see lumber marked with various things like brand stencils or colorful stripes along the edge that signify something that I'm sure 10 people will explain in the comments, but I have no idea what they mean? Well, I wanted to add some of that stuff. So I started by masking off a stripe and then laid down 1 black stripe. And in hindsight, I wish that I'd only done 1 pass to just get a more transparent look. Oh well. And then I masked off another stripe and laid down some blue. Then the last thing that I wanted to do was that I had planned to create a stencil to mark the front, but I thought to myself, you know, that might look cool on camera in a thumbnail, but I really don't want it to be there day-to-day living with this thing, so I'm just going to use Photoshop instead. #woodworking. So I'll be the first to admit that this thing is a pretty goofy project, but honestly, that's sort of the fun in creating pieces for videos. I mean, if I could only build one thing, I'd definitely steer towards the higher-end, modern woodworking pieces. But building 20 to 30 projects per year, it's nice to be able to mix it up. So thank you guys for watching and for indulging me to explore my stupid curiosities and ideas. And an extra special thanks to David Wolkin, Derek Jarman, Leo McVal, Aaron Easton, Greg Bales, Marco Pashkov, Nick DeAgostino, and the rest of my Patreon members for making these videos possible. I'm honestly floored by your generosity each and every month, and I guess I only hope that I'm bringing value into your lives the way that you're bringing value into mine. So, thank you. And if you want to find out how you can support the show too, check out the Patreon link in the description to see if it's right for you. And as always, no pressure. Right, see you next time.